Good evening. Welcome to TVB News. The US said it rescued a service member missing behind enemy lines since Iran downed an American fighter jet. This comes as US President Donald Trump renewed his threats for Iran to open up the Strait of Hormuz by Monday or face devastating consequences. Daniel Rao tells us more.
The US said it rescued a service member missing behind enemy lines since Iran downed an American fighter jet. US President Donald Trump said the aviator is injured but will be just fine, adding the rescue involved dozens of aircraft. The airman's extraction followed a frantic US search and rescue operation after the Friday crash of the F-15E Strike Eagle, as Iran also promised a reward for anyone who turned in an enemy pilot. A second crew member was rescued earlier. The fighter jet was the first US aircraft to have crashed in Iranian territory since the war, now in its sixth week, erupted. This comes as US President Trump renewed his threats for Iran to open up the Strait of Hormuz by Monday or face devastating consequences. Referring to Iran, Trump said time is running out, 48 hours before all hell will rain down on them. Meanwhile, Iran has reiterated Iraq would be exempted from transit restrictions in the Strait of Hormuz, which only apply to enemy countries. With Israel and the US continuing to trade blows with Iran, Iranian state media reported earlier strikes on the B1 bridge, which was still under construction, killed at least 8 people and wounded 95. The outlet said the victims had gathered under the bridge and along the riverbank for Nature Day, which Iranians celebrate by gathering outside. Journalists from the Associated Press witnessed widespread destruction at a Shiite religious complex in Zanjan, a city in northwestern Iran. Residents in the city told the AP an airstrike that hit the Grand Husseiniya of Zanjan on March 31st also caused damage to a library and clinic within the complex, where people used to get treated for free. Elsewhere, police forcibly dispersed anti-war protesters in Tel Aviv amid wartime restrictions and arrested at least 10 people. Several hundred people attended the demonstration at Habima Square in Tel Aviv, calling for an end to the war, in between sirens warning of incoming missiles from Iran and Yemen. Daniel Rao, TV News.
Even as large parts of southern Lebanon comes under intense Israeli bombardment, residents in some Christian neighborhoods marked Easter far from their homes with prayers and religious processions. Blasts were heard in Beirut early Saturday, with plumes of smoke rising from buildings. In the week since Israel launched bombardment in retaliation for attacks by Iranian proxy group Hezbollah, over 1,400 people have been killed in the country. More than 1 million fled from the south and east of Lebanon, as well as Beirut's southern suburbs. Many are taking refuge on the streets and improvised tent shelters in rudimentary conditions. Residents in Christian villages along the Lebanese border with Israel wanted to hold on to their land, although their expectation was dampened amid renewed Israeli airstrikes and ground invasion. On Holy Saturday, the somber day between Good Friday and Easter, congregants observed inside St. Anthony Church in the village of Alma el-Shab. As in years past, they gathered to pray and remember those who are gone. Father Maroon Ghaffari delivered sermons beside a cardboard cutout depicting the church, as the limestone walls were trapped behind the front lines of the war. He told worshippers, "We gather today while we are away from our town. However, the church stays with a community of believers." The Chor bishop said they are seeing the war isn't bringing any results except destruction, killing and displacement, and that the people of Alma el-Shab are among those most deeply wounded because they want peace, not war. Nabila Farah, one of the last villagers to leave their homes, said she still feels heartbroken about the displacement. "When holiday comes, you feel longing, nostalgia and tightness in heart," she said affectionately, reminiscing about the sound of church bells and the beautiful old traditions that they were raised with. The remains of 3 Indonesian United Nations peacekeepers who were killed while on escort duty supporting UN operations in Lebanon arrived in Jakarta on Saturday. President Prabowo Subianto led a solemn ceremony receiving the bodies. The coffins were draped in Indonesia's red and white flag as military honor guard stood at attention. Prabowo offered deep condolences to the families before the coffins were returned to their hometowns for official military funerals. Jakarta has condemned in the strongest terms the attacks that killed the peacekeepers as the Israel-Lebanon border became a flashpoint in Israel's war. Many grave sweepers headed to cemeteries to mark the Qingming festival. As per tradition, residents were seen carrying bags of offerings uphill despite the unsettled weather. Samantha Lee tells us more.
Drizzle sets the scene for the solemn occasion. In a cemetery in Diamond Hill, grave sweepers, both old and young, wiped the tombstones, burned incense, and placed flowers at the graves of their ancestors. Falling annually in early April, the festival is a time for people to fulfill their filial duties by tidying tombs and burning offerings for their loved ones. Some regulars noted that the offerings were getting more expensive this year. This lady spent nearly $1,000 on bags of offerings, including joss paper, fruits, and roasted chicken. Another grave sweeper said he found the crowd thinner than in previous years, attributing it to the Easter break as Hong Kongers flocked overseas for holidays. Despite the rain, plenty of residents still turn up with umbrellas and trolleys, heading up the hill at Cape Collison in Chai Wan. Special bus routes were running to help people get to and from the public cemetery. With gold prices recently hitting record high, paper offerings fashioned as giant gold balls have gained popularity for this Qingming festival. The shop owner said they launched these oversized items in a bid to make customers feel they are offering something special. Following the latest tech trends, the shop also introduced paper offerings shaped like robots and coffee machines to ensure the ancestors keep up with the times. Samantha Lee, TVB News.
The amber rainstorm warning was in effect for much of this afternoon as a trough of low pressure brought heavy thundery showers to the coast of Guangdong and the northern part of the South China Sea. The weather forecaster warns of flooding in low-lying and poorly drained areas. Heavy rain was hitting Wan Chai. Residents without umbrellas took shelter at MTR exits. The rain in Tsim was relatively lighter, though visibility over Victoria Harbour remained poor. At a coffee festival in the West Kowloon Cultural District, visitors were braving the rain to enjoy their brews. The rain turned the grass into a muddy field, prompting organisers to lay down plastic boards to help people get around. The observatory says the rainy weather will stay through Wednesday, with the conditions likely improving in the latter part of this week. Search and rescue crews are still looking for an 81-year-old hiker who went missing Saturday, with search efforts continuing throughout the night. It's understood that the missing is a mainlander who is in Hong Kong visiting relatives. Samantha Lee has the story.
An extensive search is underway along the McLehose Trail for the 81-year-old man who went missing in the hills Saturday. Search dogs and helicopters were deployed to assist in the operation. The police received a report from the man's son earlier, who said his parents went hiking along Section 10 of the McLehose Trail Saturday morning. While his mother left the trail during bad weather, his father stayed behind and they lost contact with him shortly after. Rescue teams found no trace of him during the overnight search, and the operation continued this morning. Sources say a shoe belonging to the missing was found at a temple near the Dawson Island Lake. Experts say the section of the trail consists mainly of paved and reservoir paths and isn't considered challenging. However, they urge hikers to plan ahead and avoid going alone. Chow Kwok-keun, chairman of the China-Hong Kong Mountaineering and Trekking Federation, said hiking alone is a big no-no. We always tell people to go in pairs so that they can look out for each other. He added that spring can bring sudden severe weather, and hikers should bring along rain gear and seek shelter in pavilions if the weather turns bad. Samantha Lee, TVB News.
And still ahead, March stock market daily turnover up 8% year-on-year. Culture and Tourism Chief says commitment with Art Basel brings economic benefits and job opportunities. And NASA's spacecraft again struggles with toilet problems. Welcome back. Financial Secretary Paul Chan said stock trading remained active despite global uncertainties. In March, the average daily turnover exceeded $300 billion, marking an 8% rise year-on-year. Amid volatility in the equity and oil markets brought by the Middle East conflict, the finance chief said Hong Kong economy showed resilience in the first quarter of this year, writing on his weekly blog. Paul Chan noted that while the Hang Seng benchmark index fell by 2%, the average daily turnover for the first 2 months exceeded $260 billion, which is a 17% hike compared to last year. The initial public offering, or IPO market, showed strong momentum too. As of March the 27th, it raised at least $103 billion, ranking first in the world. Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism Rosanna Law said the government has increased subsidy for Art Basel. Law said the measure could bring added economic benefits to Hong Kong. Mimosa Ngai reports.
The government has signed a 5-year collaboration contract with Art Basel. Speaking on a TVB program, Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism Rosanna Law said the government has enhanced subsidy for the art fair. While Law did not reveal the details, she stressed that the subsidy will bring added benefits. Referring to Art March as an example, when roughly 4.35 million visitors arrived in Hong Kong, the Secretary said mega art events had helped generate economic benefits, such as from collectors who came for Art Basel, who would stay for several days while attending other activities. Law also said authorities will focus on promoting art development, one of the key performance indicators, or KPI, stated in the hosting right agreement with Art Basel. Responding to comments that the government has not organized sufficient sports events at the Kai Tak Sports Park to meet their KPIs, Law said it might need to review the indicators. She added that an indoor car racing event could be a new activity to be held at the sports park. Mimosa Ngai, TVB News.
China's 15th five-year plan supports the globalization of Chinese pharmaceuticals. In this year's report on the work of the government, biomedicine was included as part of the emerging pillar industries layout. Domestic drug manufacturers believe that homegrown innovative drugs have already broken the monopoly of the United States and European dominance, and they see Hong Kong as an external window to achieve the global expansion of Chinese pharmaceuticals. Celine Chan files a report from Jiangsu.
All products on display here are innovative drugs developed by companies within Suzhou's BioBay. Within China's 14th five-year plan period, the scale of Chinese-made innovative drugs market hit the 100 billion yuan mark, propelling the country to become the world's second-largest player in new drug development, completing the country's transition from a major country known for low-cost generic drug production to one for innovative drugs. Established in 2007, Suzhou's BioBay provides facilities and startup funding to help incubate projects. Among those involved are teachers and students from the University of Hong Kong and the Chinese University of Hong Kong. BioBay is home to about 680 pharmaceutical and biotech enterprises, including B1 Medicines Limited. The enterprise's anti-cancer drug, zanubrutinib, achieved global sales of $3.9 billion last year.
In recent years, especially over the past decade, the development of China's innovative drugs has already broken the monopoly of Europe and the United States. In the first quarter of 2026 alone, about 4 of our drugs have been licensed overseas, meaning multinational pharmaceutical companies have spent significant funds to purchase Chinese innovative drugs. This is not just about the drugs themselves, but also the upstream and downstream supply of necessary materials, which we now have achieved independent control over. Therefore, we are very confident that Chinese innovative drugs will reach patients all around the world in the future.
This pharmaceutical group located in Yangzhou has developed China's first oral anti-HIV drug. The innovator has established a company in Hong Kong as an external window for its overseas business, targeting the US and African markets. The drug manufacturer believes that the city has advantages in financing flexibility and clinical trials, but it has no plans to set up a factory in Hong Kong at the moment, as costs such as salaries and rent are relatively high. The 15th five-year plan supports the Chinese pharmaceuticals to go global. The National Medical Products Administration recommends that enterprises should choose their overseas expansion path based on their actual circumstances and product characteristics. Celine Chan, TVB News, Jiangsu.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and announced agreement on new steps in the country's security cooperation. Zelensky has also raised concern during an interview that the Iran war, now in its 6th week, could take away America's support for his country. A week after touring Gulf nations for talks on Ukrainian support for the war in the Middle East, Zelensky was greeted by Erdogan in Istanbul on Saturday, and the two presidents agreed on concrete steps in forging closer cooperation and security. According to Zelensky, Ukraine is ready to support Turkey with expertise, technology and experience, and both teams would finalize terms in the coming days. New defense deals could be signed between the two countries soon. Joint gas infrastructure and possible co-development of gas fields were among the topics touched in their conversations. Zelensky stated they also discussed peace talks and a possible meeting of leaders in Istanbul. Erdogan reaffirmed support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity and pledged Turkey will continue to play a constructive role in mediation. While speaking with an Associated Press reporter later in the day, Zelensky expressed concerns about his country's reduced deliveries as Washington's global priority is shifting towards its prolonged fighting with Iran.
We have to recognize that we are not the priority for today. I think that we, all the world understand that the American army is, focusing on the Middle East. Yes, on Iran. That's why I'm afraid long war will give us less support. I'm sure 100% if the war will not end, the package, which is not very big for us, but I think it will be smaller and smaller day by day.
At least a dozen people were killed when an earthquake with a magnitude of 5.8 rattled parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan late Friday. 8 members of one family died, and they were among the millions of Afghan refugees who have recently returned from Iran and Pakistan. Heavy rains over the past few days, which have led to deadly floods in many parts of the country, had left the ground sodden and soft. In this case, a wall collapsed when the earthquake struck. The region is highly seismically active, and quakes have caused thousands of deaths in recent years. A fire broke out at a factory manufacturing lighters near Bangladesh's capital, Dhaka, on Saturday, leaving at least 5 people dead. Multiple firefighting units were deployed to put out the blaze, which started in the afternoon. It took several hours to bring it under control. Firefighters recovered 5 bodies by the evening, but they could not be immediately identified. The case of the fire is under investigation. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.